Kia ora koutou, everybody. My name's Rachel Idamapu, and I'd like to welcome you today to our Look Good Feel Better online Q&A session. Hope you've all had a wonderful Sunday already. We've got a really awesome session today. Just before we get started, I'll do a tiny little bit of housekeeping. So what we'll do is if you'd like to ensure that you're all on mute, just so that we can there's no background noise that's going to interrupt us when we've got our speaker talking. If you would like, you can use the chat box to ask questions. We really appreciate all your feedback and your questions coming through for this session. And what we'll do is once our wonderful David has finished with the session, we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A. But don't be afraid if you can't work the chat box. Feel free to click your little hand up on the screen, or if you can't do that, just wave your arms around, because we really want to hear from you. So we're really looking forward to some interaction. Now, what we're going to do is our David, our speaker, he's going to talk probably for around about 20 minutes, and then we're going to do some Q&A and get some feedback from you, and you may have lots of questions, and then we'll have David will talk again after that. Now, I feel very privileged today because I've had the pleasure of doing a session with David before, and so we're really excited to have David back on our screens again. So now I'd like to introduce you to David Downs. Now, David returns to discuss clinical trials. In 2018, David was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and after about 12 rounds of absolutely punishing chemotherapy, he was told his cancer was incurable. But he got onto a USA clinical trial for CAR T cell therapy that actually saved his life. But it did cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. Now, what he did is he discovered the Milagron Institute in Wellington had been working on a new version, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right, of CAR T cell therapy, and was planning New Zealand's first clinical trial. So what David has done is he's pledged to raise $1 million to help fund the trial through his campaign. So it's my absolute pleasure now to bring David onto the screen. David, welcome.
Kia ora, everyone, and thanks, Rachel, for your kind introduction. Happy Sunday to you. Hope it's nice in New Plymouth or wherever you are today.
Most certainly is. Thank you, David.
Fantastic. And kia ora, everybody. Yeah, as mentioned, my name's David. Very nice to connect with you all. I'm in Auckland, where it's finally got a bit warm today. It's been cold all day, but it's nicer now. So yes, as Rachel mentioned, I'm going to go through a little bit about my own personal story and what I learned about my treatments, but also what I learned about clinical trials in general. So if you've got questions, please, do yell out or put them in the chat or whatever you would like to do, and we can catch them at the end. But I thought I'd start by just sharing my screen, and here we go. For the first time I've ever used this particular system, so hopefully this is going to work well. Yeah, there we go. Good. And I'll tell you a little bit more about me. Now, you'll see there that website, mildtouch.nz. That's because it's called Mild Touch. When I first got diagnosed, I thought I had just a mild touch of the flu, and it became a bit of a running joke that it was just a mild touch of cancer that I had. But my cancer got less and less mild and more problematic as time went on. But anyway, a little bit more about me. Rachel's given you a pretty good introduction, but I guess it's worth saying I have a day job. I wasn't expecting to be a cancer patient. I feel like I'm defined now by being an ex-cancer patient or a cancer person. But actually, I started my life as an actor and a stand-up comedian. I've run my own businesses. I worked for Microsoft for many years. I worked for the New Zealand government at the moment in an awesome job telling the story of New Zealand to the world. You can talk about that if you want to. And along the way, I wrote a whole lot of books about technology and innovation. And the reason I bring that up is because in some ways that was really lucky that I had that history, because at the time when I was needing to get into my clinical trial, I kind of had to draw on some of my international work experience through Microsoft and my kind of understanding of how technology works and innovation and all that sort of stuff, because it's pretty bewildering when you get into these sorts of areas at the outset. So it was lucky for me that I've got those skills and had experience. And now I hope to bring that to help other people as well on things like this. So what I'm going to cover today, Rachel sort of mentioned it. I always like to start talking about the real basics of cancer, because one of the things that I've discovered is that we, including me, by the way, typically don't know that much about what cancer really is. And so it's worthwhile just sort of stepping back to the real basic things. And the reason for that, I think, is because when we were, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, it wasn't polite to talk about cancer. You didn't sort of bring it up. It was the sort of thing you whispered, and it wasn't polite conversation. But it's worthwhile thinking about it, because it frames up why now is a really interesting and exciting time in cancer therapies. I'll talk a bit about the types of treatments that are currently available, and then my personal experience of those treatments. A little bit about where we're at in New Zealand in terms of clinical trials, but more importantly, just show you a way to navigate, to understand what global clinical trials are all about. And then, of course, we've got some time for Q&A. So that's my plan for the next 15 or 20 minutes. As mentioned, if you've got questions on the way through, plonk them in the chat, and the team will be able to capture them for me for the end. So I guess the first thing on this whole idea of what is cancer, one of the weird things is that many people think there is one thing called cancer, but the reality is there isn't one thing called cancer. There's about 200 diseases that we clump together in this term called cancer. So cancer in and of itself is not a single disease. What it is a single way that your body gets sick. And this is part of the challenge. There are 200 different, probably more than that, but roughly 200 different parts of your body that can start a cancer, cells can start from. And that's the real issue, because as I say, when the cancer is different than other types of illnesses, because cancer is us. It's our own body that's gone a bit wonky. Basically, that's the way I like to think about it. When your body's normally growing, your cells are replicating. They're kind of making copies of themselves all the time, constantly refreshing parts of your body. The thing we call cancer is when that happens, but something goes wrong, and the cell copies badly, and you get a weird copy. Now, most of the time, 99.99999% of the time, your body notices that something's gone wrong, or that new cell is not viable in some way, and it just kind of destroys. But what we call cancer is those very, very, very rare occasions when a cell goes wonky, but the body doesn't notice that it's wonky. You can tell I'm not a doctor, by the way. This is my layman's description. And so that's why we end up with these different types of cancers all around the body. And they're all got a similar concept. It's a cell that's gone wrong, but they're all radically different from each other, which is why cancer is so difficult. You can't have a cure for cancer. You have cures for different types of cancer, or you have treatments for different types of cancer. So it's a consequence of our normal bodily way of working, is that we end up with these things going wrong. This also explains why cancer has got a name, because it's named after the cells that it originates from, but it can spread to other parts of your body, which is why you can potentially have something like bowel cancer, but you can have it in your liver, because it's the cells that started in your bowel but actually have migrated to other parts of your body. So that's kind of the real basic cancer stuff. The challenge with this is that means that you can't just give a treatment, and you can't give a treatment that will fix all types of cancer. You're basically plugging away at lots of different ways of treating. Now, for many years, the only ways that we've had to treat cancer, we humans, is what I call cut, burn, and poison. And none of them are very nice, and I'm sure some of you on the call have experienced one or all of them. I certainly did. Cut is obviously surgery. That was the sort of original treatment for cancer, for nearly 1,000 years or more. That's the way that we had to deal with cancer, is try and cut it out. Burn is when you treat something with radiation, and that kills all the cells around a particular area. And poison is that chemotherapy, when you're basically giving the patient a dose of chemicals that you hope will kill the cancer, but usually has a big side effect of killing lots of other cells too, because it's a pretty blunt instrument. So as I say, these are the traditional weapons that we've got, if you like, because it's really tricky to treat cancer. It is our own body, it's our own cells, and each of these three treatments is in a different way trying to kill the actual cancer cell. Now, the theory behind what I had and what some of you might be experiencing is a new treatment, a fourth type of treatment. So it's not a different variation of chemotherapy. It's not a different sort of class of drugs. It's a whole new way, a fourth way of treating cancer. And the theory here is, what if we could actually, instead of trying to kill the cancer, what if we could teach the body what cancer looks like, and then get the body to do what it's very good at? And that's what the basic theory is behind this concept of immunotherapy. So immunotherapy is a fourth different way of treating cancer. It basically it doesn't actually try and kill cancer. What it instead does is try and help the immune system to do its job better. Because the human immune system has evolved over hundreds of millions of years to be very, very good at fighting things. It's just that it needs a helping hand every now and then. So the immune system is incredibly well tuned. Again, I'm not a specialist doctor, so I won't go into the details of it, but there are many, many components. It's incredibly complex, but at its core, what the immune system is doing is recognizing things that aren't right in the body, whether that's an infection or a cell that's gone wonky, and then helping to fight it, whether that's killing it or telling it to kill itself or all sorts of things. So basically that's the kind of the normal human immune response. Body's really good at it. The type of immunotherapies you may have heard of that have become pretty common at the moment are things like Keytruda or pembrolizumab. That's now being used in quite a lot of treatments. That uses a particular way of tuning up the immune system. And the particular treatment I had is a thing called CAR T-cell therapy, as Rachel said. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that because it's a really exciting branch of immunotherapy that seems to be giving some great results. So that's kind of the fourth way of treating. As I mentioned, the big difference here is traditional cancer therapies, radiation, drugs, etc., try to kill the cancer cells. Cancer immunotherapies unleash your own immune system to kill the cancer cells. So it's a very different way. And as you can see there on the slide, rather hopefully it says one of the big differences is that you end up with hopefully not as many side effects, because the traditional treatments are pretty blunt instruments. And so for me, the thing that we're trying to do here is see if there's ways that can be new treatments that can be utilized to address cancer. So as mentioned, one of these types of immunotherapies is a thing called CAR T-cell therapy. And this sort of first came on the scene about 10 or 12 years ago now in terms of the first trials of it. And you can see there we're really getting some quite great results about it, on it, particularly for blood cancers, to be open with you. And there are treatments that are being trialed for other solid tumors, we call them, cancers. And they're getting some okay results. But the big thing here is that because immunotherapy, in particular CAR T-cell therapy, is so new, it's very, very early days, but we're seeing some really exciting initial results. The way CAR T-cell therapy works, if this little video is going to play for me, let's have a go at this, is, again, using the human immune system. So again, in your body, there are these things called T-cells, which is part of the immune system. It's a complex system. The T-cells run around the body normally fighting infection. The problem is that to them, as I mentioned, the cancer cells just look like a normal cell. So the body's immune system just ignores a cancer cell. This is a blood cancer. So the theory is, could we teach the T-cell what cancer looks like by helping it grow those little receptors on the outside? I'll come back to that. The way they do that is they take blood, they skim off some of those T-cells, and then they genetically re-engineer the T-cell. They put a new piece of DNA into that T-cell that makes it sprout those little receptors on the outside. And those receptors are the clever bit. They're the bit that actually help the T-cell recognize what a cancer cell looks like. And then in the case of CAR T-cell therapy, they replicate those cells in their millions and millions. And when they put them back into the body, on the outside of those cancer cells, there happens to be little clusters of proteins sticking up. And those clusters are different than normal cells. And that's what the T-cell can now recognize. That modified T-cell has the ability to notice that there's something on the outside of a cell that's different than a normal cell. And it latches onto it and it sends it a little signal that says die. So you can see here that this is really sophisticated compared to chemotherapy or anything like that. Because in chemotherapy, you're basically just poisoning everything in the body. In this form of therapy, it's actually very, very targeted to the specific cell that might be cancerous. So that's why it's such an exciting and different way of treating cancer. So for me, I was lucky enough to have this in 2017. That's me the day that I went into the clinic in Boston. I ended up having to go to the USA for this treatment under a clinical trial. I'll come back to that. But they took out all my T cells. That's what T cells look like when they're first taken out of the body. It took about 7 hours or something on the machine. So I was pretty delighted when they took them out, as you can see. Then they send them off to the laboratory and they modify those T cells. It takes about 3 weeks in terms of the lab time. And when they come back and they're in a tiny little vial like this, a little injection, about 2.5 mils, about a teaspoonful of my own T cells that have been modified, they injected that into me. So as far as my body was concerned, I was just getting, like getting a flu shot or something, but it was my own cells. And then I waited a couple of weeks. I waited with bated breath, but because I was wondering what was happening inside me, and it ended up ironically feeling like I got the flu. And then that lasted about a week, and then I went back to the doctor when I felt better, and I said, "Is that it? Like that was a pretty mild flu." And he did a PET scan, he did all the tests, and he said, "It's the best possible outcome. There's no sign of cancer left in your body." This is 6 weeks earlier. Unfortunately for me, I had less than a year to live, probably 6 months to live. Cancer through my body. This modified T cell thing had basically gone through and killed all of those T cells. Incredible. Now, as I mentioned, I did this under a clinical trial, and the reason I had to do it under a clinical trial is because this wasn't available in New Zealand at all. The only option we had in New Zealand was chemotherapy. I tried all the different chemotherapies they could throw at me. I had a year of it. You can see that I was looking pretty beaten up. My hair come and gone multiple times. It's struggling to come back now. I don't think it ever will. But because of that, I had to get on this clinical trial in the US. And that meant for me, actually, not just going to the US once, but going there, actually, I went there about 12 times. Let's see if this works. It might make us all a bit sick. I ended up flying from New Zealand all the way to Boston on the east coast of the US to this hospital called Massachusetts General Hospital, which is the teaching hospital of Harvard Medical School in Boston. And that is where they were testing at the time this new treatment, this clinical trial treatment. As I mentioned, I didn't have to do it once. I actually ended up doing it time. So this is bouncing back and forth across the Pacific multiple times. But I won't bore you with it. Now, the issue that we have, and it was even more so back then, is that CAR T cell therapy is very expensive. For me, it was, when I was first quoted how much it was going to cost for this clinical trial, it was potentially up to $1 million, which was just crazy, out of the question, never could happen. But through a whole series of luck and friends and negotiating with the American health system and things going really well for me, etc., it came in at only about $300,000. So I felt like I got an amazing discount. But if you'd said that at the beginning, it was going to cost that, it would have been crazy. But no, it's just so incredibly expensive. It's out of reach for so many people. Interestingly, the CAR T cell therapy is currently the second most valuable substance by weight in the whole universe. These cells are incredibly expensive to create. There's a lot of advanced engineering. There's all the science behind it, etc. So the challenge is we've got a treatment that looks like it's really positive and can have an impact, but it's so expensive that it's out of reach for many, many people. And the challenge, therefore, the obvious answer is, what can we do about it? Can we somehow bring the cost down? And how could we make this more affordable and accessible? And the good news is it is coming down already. Like any new thing, when there's only a few people using it, it's incredibly expensive. More and more people use it, it becomes cheaper and cheaper. As we learn how to do this better, it becomes cheaper. There's also techniques that are being used to do the treatment in a different way. So using, for example, standard off-the-shelf cells. So at the moment, you need the individual patient cells, but what if we could just, like when I get a blood transfusion, I just get a bag of blood from somebody that happens to match me. potentially we could have that sort of thing as well in the future, and that would make it a lot cheaper. And it goes even as far as manufacturing the cells inside the human body, which is basically how the mRNA vaccine works. It's using the body to do the manufacturing. So there's a lot of techniques, but it's still early days for many of these techniques. We're still exploring ways. The good news for us in New Zealand, and it's almost unbelievable really, is that we have one of the world's leading bioresearch institutes and cancer research institutes basically on our doorstep here in Wellington. New Zealanders don't realise how advanced this institute is. It's right up there with some of the best in the world. And the Malaghan Institute, it's called, and they're based in Wellington. They're a charitable organisation, so they basically operate from using philanthropy and grants and all sorts of things. They work in close collaboration with universities and cancer research institutes around the world. They focus on immunology. So as I mentioned, this is the idea of using the human immune system. They're a charity, Wellington-based, as I mentioned, but they have an international reach. And when I came back to New Zealand after my trip to Boston, or many trips to Boston, they reached out to me and said, we want to show you what we're doing here in Wellington. And I was just so blown away when I saw what they were up to, that they were as advanced as anywhere in the world on developing this CAR T-cell therapy here in New Zealand. And in fact, they've sort of taken it another step forward with the idea of automating the manufacturing in a different way to speed things up. This article is all about how they've brought in some new technology that can mean that multiple people can be treated at once. The Malaghan Institute launched a clinical trial for CAR T-cell therapy about 3 years ago during COVID. It's pretty tricky. And so far have treated about 35, 40 patients, I think it is, all with varying results, but largely very good and largely in line with international experiences of how the stuff can work well. So we're really at a really exciting time, when New Zealand's got a clinical trial up and running, seeing some results that are as good as anyone in the world using this advanced new treatment. So the good news, if you've got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma like me, is that this treatment is potentially available to you. The tricky news, of course, is that for other cancers, it's not yet available. These treatments are right at their infancy, right in the first few years of being developed. And that means that your option to get on this type of treatment for other cancers is a bit more limited. So I'm going to just quickly shift to clinical trials as a couple more slides, and then we'll go to Q&A. So this clinical trials basically is the idea that medicine is constantly evolving. If you think of your technology that's in your phone, I like to use this analogy. Many of you on the call, I can't see you all, but I'm sure you can remember days when we had phones stuck on the wall at home, and the only way you could make a phone call was by going usually to one room in the house and making a call. I'm 53. I remember as a kid, if we wanted to make a phone call, we'd first of all pick up the phone and listen to make sure that no one else was using it on the party line, because we had a party line on our street. If you think about how far the technology has come from those days of using a phone to today, when you can think of all the things your phone can do, and that's only in the last 40 or so years, clinical exploration and science has made the same leaps and bounds, but it's a lot slower in medicine to be adopted. Quite rightly, because you can't have a bug like you can when the phone doesn't work. Oh yeah, we'll roll out a new version. So medicine has moved a long way, but it has to go very cautiously. And the way that it tests things is through clinical trials. So clinical trials are a very legitimate way of cancer patients getting treatment. It's actually, if you're like me, a bit of a techno nerd and like looking at new technology, clinical trials are a really great way to see what the future might be. And I was really excited when I found out there were clinical trials in with my cancer treatment. So I reached out and got on a clinical trial. I was very lucky with the way it worked for me. But what I've discovered is that clinical trials are relatively straightforward to find. There is a global database of clinical trials, clinicaltrials.gov. It's maintained by the US government, but it actually captures trials from all around the world. And on this website, you can go in, or what you probably should do is do it with your doctor or ask your doctor to help you do it. Go in and search for what treatment is available for your type of cancer. And what you'll discover is for virtually every cancer that's out there, or any kind of disease really, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of trials going on. Now, not all of them will be successful, and not all of them are going to be major breakthroughs, but certainly some of them will show quite great promise. So this particular trial I'm showing you on screen is for CAR T-cell therapy for cancer. What it'll show you when you search is a whole lot of different treatments, different options that come up. If you look at the first few lines here, you can see it tells you that it's currently recruiting for new patients, what the study's about. The first one's about malignant ovarian cancer, where it will be undertaken. That one, particular one's in China. So you can see here that this database is a really rich repository of all the global trials. That if you search for New Zealand, for example, you discover there's the first one there that's the Malaghan Institute's clinical trial. You can see it's being held in Wellington. So it's a really amazing database. The trick about it, of course, is it's not as easy as just Googling something like this and finding a clinical trial and saying, yeah, I'll have that one. Most of the time you'll need your doctor's support and guidance to help make sure that you are a suitable candidate, that it is right for your condition. There are often things about that clinical trial that need to be taken into account. But it's good, and I often help other patients navigate this, because it's useful for you when you go and talk to your doctor to be able to tell them, I've had a look and I've had a think, and could I be a candidate for one of these trials? So that's the global clinical trial database. And with that, I've noticed I've talked for a little bit longer than I was going to, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I will start answering any questions you might have, and we can come back to the slideshow if we need to after that. Hopefully that was useful, Rachel.
Wonderful, David. That was awesome. Thank you very much. Just really fascinating to hear about the sheer volume of trials that are happening around the world. But how proud are we with our Malaghan Institute in New Zealand that they're so advanced. Ladies and gentlemen, has anybody got any questions for David? We've got one here. Is there any recruitment for you to change your diet or lifestyle? Oh, any requirement, sorry, to change your diet or lifestyle. Good question. That's a really good question.
Well, given we're on the Look Good, Feel Better presentation today, every trial will be different. So if it's about a clinical trial, every trial will be different. But I'd say it really is the same as when you get diagnosed with a major illness like cancer at all. It's a reason to think, jeepers, do I have to do something a bit different about my lifestyle or my diet? So for me, for example, there was nothing that I had been eating or doing badly that caused my cancer. It was just dumb luck. But there are certainly things that can cause other cancers or have a strong correlation. So sometimes, giving up smoking or drinking or whatever is a good thing to do. For my clinical trial, there was nothing I had to do particularly differently. I did feel quite tired a lot of the time, so I had to I probably exercised and that's those sorts of things as much as I could, but not as much as I would have liked to. But no, there was no particular requirement. But different trials will have different requirements.
Cool, thanks, David. We've got another question here. David, are you finding more New Zealanders are able to join overseas clinical trials? And are there always huge costs involved? So was the cost for your trial, was that mostly with that travel, going to Boston all the time, or the actual trial itself?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And again, it's a bit of it depends answer. Yes, the first bit of the question, yes, I'm definitely, there are Kiwis going overseas for a trial fairly regularly. I mean, I'm a very small sample size, but I probably talk to one a month, maybe, who's going overseas. And sometimes, they're going to Australia. Australia is obviously the most convenient overseas location. And there are definitely treatments available in Australia that we can't get in New Zealand. sadly.
Mm.
But also, to America, to China. I've met at least 3 people who've gone to China for treatment, a couple to the US or UK, and quite a few to the US. The challenge is, yes, A, traveling when you're sick is not easy. B, it can be expensive to travel. And then depending on what hospital system you end up with, so the reason mine was so incredibly expensive was not only because it's such advanced science, but because the American health system is basically rubbish. It's great quality treatment, but boy, you have to pay for it. It's a business. It's not here in New Zealand. We're used to healthcare being a service. Over there, it's a business, and it's just a radically different way of thinking about it. So if you end up in the US and you don't have insurance, then actually, it can be incredibly expensive. But having said all that, there are definitely treatments for different types of therapy where they're very available and low cost. So don't be put off for it. It's not like it's a bit like I said earlier. Every cancer is different. Same with every clinical trial or every treatment. I've got friends who've been on clinical trials where they actually got paid to go on the clinical trial because the pharmaceutical company was so keen to get people on it that they actually ended up paying their costs, their travel costs and that sort of thing. So it's not a one size fits all answer. And that's why that global database is really good to go through. It gives you a bit of input and feedback on those questions.
And just on that, I think it'd be really cool if we could add that database into the chat so people can pick it up if you weren't able to write it down. We've got another question here for you, David. Do you know when the Wellington trial is supposed to start? Have you got any idea? Any idea there?
Yeah, well, it already has. It's been going for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's been going for about 2 years. They've just in a pause period at the moment. They've done the first phase of the clinical trial. They treated, as I say, I think about 35 or 40 patients from what I heard the other day. They're just in a couple of months worth of pause while they get the money to do the next phase of the clinical trial, which will be able to treat many more, like over 100. But essentially, if you're the type of patient and this is a really important point. It goes back to this point of every cancer is different. Do not call the Malaghan Institute because they are a research institute. The way you get to them is via your doctor. And your doctor will tell you you're suitable in New Zealand if you've got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that's suitable for their particular treatment. Unfortunately, that's the treatment they're currently working on at the moment. That doesn't work for other types of cancer. As I said earlier, that's why it's really important to know. But if you're the type of patient that has the right type of cancer, your hematologist will know about the Malaghan Institute. I've been on lots of meetings with lots of doctors, part of the briefings. So they all know about it. And now they're ready to sign people up for the next phase of the clinical trial. One day, hopefully, crossing my fingers, in the not too distant future, I hope we'll see trials for other types of cancer as well. But there's a whole nother presentation. New Zealand's health system is incredibly slow moving, and it's frustrating for those of us who work with it. We're not seeing other types of cancer treatments coming to market nearly as fast as we could, frankly, and it's a bit of an indictment. I mean, many of you, I'm sure, see the news where you see people, raising money to fund treatments or having to head overseas, and some of that, unfortunately, is because we're just too slow here. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah. That's okay. That's all right. Just a question from me, David. And I guess looking at the US, so they had their study or they did their research into the trial. When does a trial go? Well, when does a treatment go from trial phase to now it's actually a treatment? How long is that? What's the timeframes there?
That's a great question. There's no black and white answer, but typically it takes a couple of 2 to 3 years. If that's probably minimum. Having said that, there are now already clinical, publicly available CAR T cell therapies. The one I had, that is now publicly available. You can just, if you're in the US and you want it, you can just go to a hospital and pay for it. You don't have to go on a trial. And the reason for that is because they've shown such great results. So they're so effective that the FDA, the US government's authority, rushed them through to get out to doctors. So that's good news. And we're seeing the same sort of thing globally. In Australia, there's, I think, 2, maybe 3 of these CAR T cell therapies available under, it's called standard of care, which means it's available just generally. It's not a clinical trial. We don't have any of them available in New Zealand under the standard of care yet. We've only got this one clinical trial option.
Okay. So to find, because we've got another question coming in, to find trials available in Australia, what's the process? Is that to go through that global database, or?
Yeah. Let me share my screen again. Give this a bash. Can you see my screen now?
It's just on tiny at the moment, so our magicians in the background, hopefully they can make the tile really big so we can see the presentation. There we go.
Cool. So this answers 2 questions. The first was, I can't see the global website. Well, that's it there, clinicaltrials.gov. So that's an American government website. When you land on that, you'll end up with this little very simple search. You put in your condition, you put it, and then to the question that was just asked, how do you find out the ones in Australia? You can put in a location as well. So Australia. This will be huge. This will be a big set of results. This will show me all clinical trials in Australia for breast cancer. And then I can go down and say, actually, I'm only looking for the ones that are currently recruiting. In other words, they're actively looking for people. And I'll apply that filter, and that'll bring it down to 78. And then I'll just get rid of that for a second. And then you can see them all there. So these are all of the different treatments that are available. One of the things over on the right-hand side here is the sponsor. So that, that usually tells you who the company is that's sponsoring it. I could, for example, if I click on this link here, I can click through and it'll show me much more information about that particular treatment. And this is, again, where you start to really need your doctor, because unless you're an absolute expert in your own cancer, this can get quite technical. But it will usually, like me, I'd been studying the stuff and reading about myself, so I kind of knew enough to get at 50% right. And then I could go and ask my doctor the rest of it. And then down here, you'll see where specifically it's available in which part of the country. So this one's available in the Peter Mac Centre, which is in Melbourne. You can see down here, there's 2 Melbourne facilities. So it gives you a lot of information to be able to, and the way I think about this is, you as a cancer patient or your carer, your friends or whatever, have probably got a lot more time to spend wasting your time reading stuff like this than your doctor does. So even it might take you hours and hours to read through, you've got that time, whereas your doctor usually only has a few 20 minutes before your session, and they are busy and they don't have time to Google it all. And so while you might not have the same expertise that they have, you can certainly get it down to a rough point. I mean, I used to read through all this sort of stuff and then send links to my doctor and go, is this the sort of thing that would be suitable? Or I'd print them out and ask her. And that was actually quite useful. She was a really good doctor. Some doctors don't like you doing that.
I guess that's the thing. Not all things are made equal, are they, David? And so do you think most doctors are fairly open to this sort of thing?
I think
advocating,
many are. Some of them are a bit old school, and obviously they probably get questions all the time, so some of them can get a bit grumpy. But I would hope that they would be. But at the same time, I always say, talk to your doctor. The doctors are the expert. I'm just a guy that happens to know a little bit, but the doctor's absolutely the expert. So, take their advice. I do always, I have to say, tell cancer patients, if they're not getting very far with their doctor, if their doctor's being really dismissive or not listening to them, then get a second opinion. There are plenty of good other doctors around. If you can afford it, a private care second opinion will cost you a few $100s, but it's usually money really well spent, because then that private doctor will go through in much more detail, read things more than your public doctor will have time to do. It's not that they don't have the ability, but they just usually don't have the time. So if you're at that point where you're just frustrated and you're not getting through, or you're just like this, talking at cross purposes with your doctor, ask if you can have a second opinion, and then get your new, the private doctor. And yes, it will cost you a few $100s, but that might be a money well spent.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So we've got in the chat, I hope you've all been able to see that, we've got the website for the trials up there, clinicaltrials.gov. Now, we've also got another question, David, for you. Were you briefed on any types of risks involved prior to your trial? So, yeah, what was involved there?
Yeah, I often make the joke that doctors would be terrible car salesmen because they always tell you everything that could go wrong with the car. So the answer is absolutely yes, but to the point where it's kind of comical. They'll say, "Oh, here's all the things. You're going to go on this trial. Here's all the things that could go wrong," and you'll spend 2 hours talking about all the stuff. To the point where at the end of it, you're going, "So why am I doing this again?" And they go, "Oh, we forgot to tell you. Yeah, because it could work." You go, "Oh, okay." Well, so yes is the answer. I mean, there are risks with everything. Definitely in medicine, and that's why, as I said earlier, it moves slowly because they're very risk averse. They would try very hard not to introduce a new treatment that might have any major issues, but you're always taking a risk. For me, for this CAR T cell therapy, there were essentially 3 or 4 kind of side effect risks that they were worried about. All of them were really because they've had in the past times where it just works too well, and it's like getting septicemia or a really big septic shock. So basically, they put these new T cells in your body. The T cells recognize the cancer cells and they just go crazy. Like your body's immune system goes into overdrive, and you get basically like a toxic shock. But that's a very small risk these days for this. They've treated that. They know how to fix it. They've got all the kind of mitigations, but they've stopped it happening as well. So the Malaghan Institute, for example, in those 30-something patients haven't had any side effects like that. They've had very mild issues, if any. So, yeah. So the answer is yes.
Yeah. And actually, just staying on side effects for a little bit, does the website have any clinical trials for those who have got side effects of cancer treatment? A lot of people suffer with the side effects of the treatment. So is there any type of new trial drugs, I guess, that anybody's researching?
I would imagine. I'm not the expert there, but I would imagine so. Like pretty much everything that you can think of. This is a global database of all medicine trials. So if you've got a side effect and you've got treatment for that side effect, then there's probably information about those trials, but it kind of gets outside my expertise there.
Sure, yeah, because I think we've got the eye graft versus host disease, so that's probably something worth.
Well, yeah, graft versus host is a real issue for people who get treatments a bit like this. The difference with CAR T is because it's your own cells, you don't get that GVH stuff. You get that's not as much a side effect risk.
Great. Wonderful. I think I can see, David, you've been immersing yourself in all this information for such a long time. You've got an incredible knowledge and an incredible backstory as well. So, yeah, thank you very much.
I always get worried that because I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, but I have navigated a lot of this with other patients and sort of learned from it. And then usually it goes back to their doctor to make the final decisions. That should do. That's the right way to do it. But it's enough for patients. I think it's quite important for patients to be a bit more self-empowered, to feel like you don't have to sit. The thing that frustrated me the most was going to a hospital appointment or a doctor's appointment, and all you got was the thing saying when your next appointment was, and you felt so useless because you're waiting to find out something, and it feels like you haven't got any kind of agency over your own destiny.
Yes.
Yeah, our power. And so even just doing things like this, even if you're on the wrong track, as I said earlier, it gives you enough information to go, actually, I'm kind of know a little bit more. And now I can talk to my doctor a little bit more knowledgeably than I did before. And I think that's a really useful thing. I think it's important for us humans to feel like we have got some control in our lives. Otherwise, we feel like, victims. And actually, one of the worst things you can feel like, I think, as a patient is to get into that victim mentality of like, you've got no control. It's a mindset, and it's hard to get out of it. But if you can do things that make you feel like, oh, okay, I'm participating, I think it's really powerful.
Great, thank you. We've got another question coming in. So just going back to side effects again, do you still suffer from neuropathy?
Yeah. Who asked that one? Mikhail. Yeah. Sadly, Definitely in my toes. Because and the thing is here, neuropathy, for those who don't know, it's sort of tingling or numbness in your outer limbs. And the reason that happens is because, particularly usually a side effect of chemotherapy, not of immune therapy, but chemo. I'd had a year of chemotherapy, and that kills fast growing cells, and nerve cells are fast growing. So a lot of your nerves get killed off. And the long nerves, which are the nerves that serve your toes and your fingers, can be the ones that either never grow back or take many years to grow back. So for me, I still have numb toes and a bit tingly at times. And this is 6 years later, so it's still happening. So I probably always will. But that's a pretty minor complaint for me. I'm lucky I didn't have it too bad. And I remember when I had chemo, I felt like I had gloves on. I could only feel up to about there, and then this bit up here was completely numb. But over the sort of 3 or 4 months after I finished chemo, it all came back again. But now I've still got the numb toes.
I guess that's part of your story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and the hair too. That's the other one. I blame the hair on chemo. I probably would have got it anyway because I'm getting older.
Let's go with that, shall we? We'll go with that.
Yeah. But I like to say that if the price of getting old is looking old, I'm willing to pay it.
100%. Yeah. Also, too, David, I think your outlook on life and that smiling and laughing and viewing that bright side of things, I think makes a huge difference, like you've just said, isn't it?
Well, on that point, if I can share something else with you, I wanted to just jump across. I'll share my screen again. I did that. Talk to you, Doctor. As I mentioned earlier, I hooked up with the Malaghan Institute to help them out. That was a really empowering thing to do as well, like raising some money. We smashed through that $1 million, by the way. They should update the website because we're now looking for 8 million. But anyway, no good deed goes unpunished, as my mother says. But so that's great news. The Malaghan Institute is absolutely helping. But on your point, Rachel, about having a positive outlook, one of the things that I remember when I was sick is this whole concept of playing the cancer card. And I used to find myself in a jokey way, like making excuses like, "Oh, I can't do the dishes because I've got cancer," and everyone else going, "Oh, he's just playing the cancer card." And my friends at work heard about this, and they made me a set of cancer cards, which when I was sick were very funny. Like I used to play them all the time, and here's one playing on my son to get him to do the lawns. I got it specially made. So that's me like playing the cancer card, and I just thought it was so funny because it kind of showed everyone that you still have a sense of humor. It's all fun. So anyway, now I make these cancer cards. I get them like printed and stuff like that, and I sell them for charity. I give all the money to the Malaghan Institute. But I've also can give them away as well. So anyone that's on this call that would like a pack of cancer cards to be able to play them on your family to make them do stuff. Now you got to have a good sense of humor because some of the humor is a little bit dark. So but by all means, jump on that website mildtouch.nz, and you'll see there you can buy my book if you want to, or in fact I think it's all free. If you use that freebie code, you'll get a free book or a free pack of cancer cards. Put in your name and address and all that sort of stuff. It might charge you the shipping, I'm not sure. But they're a good thing to do just to show people that you're still you and you've still got a sense of humour and it's good fun. And so feel free to grab yourself some cancer cards. Hope
that's awesome, Dave. And I think maybe that helps other people as well navigate their way through, like what have we got there? Yeah. I'm already
on stage 4. So yeah, there's the cancer card on the back. So yeah, it helps other people too. Like it becomes a bit of a joke that people can, because it's like I said right at the beginning. One of the things that's tough about it is that it's whispered about, and everyone's a bit solemn and a bit, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to talk to you. And if you're the sort of person that actually just wants to, be as normal as you can, then this is a good way to do it.
Fantastic.
So there you go.
Wonderful. Some really good feedback coming through in the chat there. Some people have read your book and said it's wonderful. I've read your book and it is wonderful, and they love the thought of the cards, but also really appreciating your humour and David being David, which is we know is absolutely stunning. So Now, look, we're getting closer to the end of our workshop. Is there any more questions? Is there anybody out there that hasn't been able to put their questions in the chat or would like to just raise their hand and chat with us? Please, by all means, before we wrap it up. And that is okay. Look, I think that is it for us. David, is there any last anything you'd like to add before we let all these
little bonus if you're into it? Let me show you. I showed you that little video about this about the CAR T cell therapy, and it's quite amazing computer graphics. But the guys at the Malaghan Institute have given me this little bit of footage, which I just think is just amazing. Just goes to the point about the advanced cancer therapy. So this is real. This is like a video of a cell, and the red cells are cancer cells, and the green cells are those modified T cells that I mentioned earlier. These are the ones that have been genetically re-engineered. And we can see there what's happening is this is in a petri dish in Wellington. This is literally in the Wellington lab. And those little T cells are kind of inspecting the outside of the cell, and then they find those little, I told you about those little clusters that stick up that make the cancer cell look different. And that's when those immune cells can kick in and they send a signal to the cancer cell. And that flash you see is the interior of the cell exploding, because those T cells are basically told it to explode. It's an incredible breakthrough, so much more precision treatment than chemotherapy or radiation or anything. It's your own immune system doing the hard work. And the beautiful thing, as I say, is this is in Wellington, New Zealand. This is treatment that I went to Boston, spent $300 and something thousand getting, and now our amazing scientists are doing the same sort of thing here in New Zealand. So we live in incredibly interesting and wonderful times. We're not there completely, but we're certainly at the beginning of amazing breakthroughs in cancer therapy. So, I hope that gives us all a little bit of hope and admiring of the incredible work that's going on. And thanks for having me too.
How number 8 why are we as New Zealanders? We get on and do it, don't we? A little bit more than that, I have to say. David, there is one more question coming in here. They've heard of a doctor in Whangarei area that's doing T-cell therapy. Have you heard of this particular doctor?
No, don't know about a doctor. If I mean, there's therapies involving T cells, so I would imagine it might not be this CAR T cell thing. It might be something a bit different, but I don't know is the answer.
Okay.
But T cells, as I say, are kind of part of your immune system. You might be an immune expert of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Wonderful. Now I know what my Keytruda is doing. So there was a comment in there saying, "Wow, thank you. Now I know what my Keytruda is doing." So that video that's stunning, wasn't it? Just that's absolutely beautiful. Fascinating. That teach your body what it needs to do to get the job done. So
that's right. Good on you, Jamie. Keep it up, and everyone on the call. Good luck to all of you. It's really lovely to spend some time. Have great. Connection with this community, given what we've all been going through together. So just wonderful to spend some time together.
Yeah, fantastic. And so that video that you just showed there, David, is that on the Malaghan website?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually. They gave it to me sort of on the sly, so it might be, but I don't know is the answer. If not, get in touch and I'll see what I can do.
Sure, absolutely. Wonderful. All right, everybody, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to see you all and really appreciate you coming online. Don't forget, we'll be holding these workshops every month. So we've got some fabulous speakers coming up this year as well and in the next couple of months. So David, a huge thank you for what you've brought to this workshop and for sharing your story and your knowledge and just for sharing you. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and take care.